I want to bring in our legal analyst now, Curtis Fallgatter. You've been watching this trial very closely. This jury heard 7 days of testimony. They had a lot of evidence to consider, and they returned this guilty verdict in less than 4 hours. Your reaction?
A quick jury verdict is typically a government verdict. So that's what happened here, and they sifted through the evidence. And as Ken just pointed out, the jury's instructed that direct evidence is no different than circumstantial, just as powerful, and sometimes circumstantial evidence is more powerful than direct. You don't have a gun, so what? They would have thrown it away. So the real killer, I think, for the defense was trying to suggest that there wasn't a motive. He was the only one with a motive, and Tennant had zero motive. Why would he do it? He didn't rob the man. The only reason was a contract killing, and all the dots connected in the mind of the jury, and correctly so.
In the closing statements, the Assistant State Attorney Christina Stifler said that Mario Fernandez is the thread that links Henry Tennant to this crime. And I think that really stuck with the jurors, saying that he was the threat. He was the common, spoke in the wheel was one of the words that she used. Take us through what happens next. We know that a hearing has been scheduled for October 5th to determine when his sentencing hearing is. What is he looking at?
Well, they waived the death penalty, but he's still facing life. So I can't imagine a sentence much different than that. It's premeditated murder. He deserves a life sentence. I would expect that's what he's going to get. There'll be a complex sentencing hearing. They'll do sentencing memorandums. They'll call witnesses, character witnesses, maybe some psychologists. But ultimately, I would reasonably expect that the life sentence would be imposed.
And how do you think, Curtis, I was asking Ken this, is going to impact Shanna Gardner's trial? Shanna Gardner is Mario Fernandez's now estranged wife, who is the ex-wife of Jared Bridegan. Her jury selection is supposed to start on Monday, with her starting her trial the following week. How do you think it's going to impact it?
A couple things could happen. First is a quick verdict. She might rethink the need of having a trial. Maybe it's time to cut her losses and work out something. If she doesn't, then they may want to implement a little different strategy than what we saw in the Fernandez case. For example, he admitted that Tennant was the murderer. Was that the right thing to do? Was that the smart thing? Because that's the key to the case, and it's the same thread you just talked about. If she admits that, she's likely looking at a similar verdict.
Very interesting. Another question that they raised during the trial was that Henry Tennant is believed to be seen on surveillance video walking away from the area where this happened in Jacksonville Beach back on February 16th, 2022, but someone was driving his truck, and no one was able to answer who was driving his truck. Could it have been someone else? We don't know. How do you think that played into all of this?
Well, that's a factor, but the key thing is, again, that thread. You got Tennant. There's no reason in the world he'd be out on that street at that time, at that location, committing a murder. And why would he do that and not steal something from the car, from the person? Only because of him being the thread with the conspiracy to commit the murder, and she clearly has to be a part of it.
Yeah, and for that guilty verdict, the state did not have to prove that Mario was there when the crime happened, only that he was a principal in that. And describe what a principal is. A
principal is when I hire you to go rob a bank. I'm the principal. You may rob the bank, but I'm the one that put you up to it. I got you the ski mask. I got you the gun. I gave you the layout to the bank. I'm just as guilty as a principal as if I had committed the crime.
Ken, you've investigated cases before. What was the critical evidence in this case you think led to that guilty verdict today?
Basically good police work and a great prosecutor. They presented all of the evidence, all of the facts. They laid it out. That prosecutor did an excellent job of just laying it out plainly for the jury to see it. And it was, in my opinion, no doubt that they had all of the ammunition that they needed to convict this guy, basically based on all of the evidence that they presented and all the witnesses that they called. You notice that the defense, I think, only called two witnesses.
Two witnesses, yeah.
Two witnesses. So I think that they kind of understood, okay, we're in a sinking ship right now, and we'll call whoever we can call to try to get what we can to keep this guy alive, and maybe he'll get life. I'm just saying maybe that's how they were thinking, and they just threw up the flag, the white flag.
Curtis, the fact that no weapon was ever found, it's believed to have been a 10-millimeter gun, no weapon was ever found, and this was a largely circumstantial case. Were you surprised that it came back guilty?
I was expecting it. You never know. Defense did a pretty good job, two extraordinarily gifted prosecutors, but the defense did a great job. They pointed out a lot of holes in the case. But normally you don't have to prove motive, and you tell the jury that. But this case was really all about motive. The strongest part of the case was the motive. Who else on the planet would have done this horrendous premeditated murder except for someone that had a reason to get rid of him? And they're the only ones on the planet that had the reason. Tennant had none. So the motive ultimately, I think, played a really large role. And again, I think the defense conceding that Tennant was the murderer and he's the tenant of Fernandez with all the connections there was a bit of a strategic error.
And he was the tenant who Mario Fernandez-Saldana had evicted and then later paid a total of $10,000 in checks 1 to 2 months after Jared Bridegan was murdered. And for our viewers who haven't been following this closely, the state laid out what appears to be a compelling case with that guilty verdict, that a tire was intentionally placed in the road, a dark road, on the night of February 16th, just seconds before Jared Bridegan had driven to that spot right after he had dropped off his twins that he shared with his ex-wife Shannon Gardner, Mario Fernandez's estranged wife, and that when he got out of his car to move that tire, that's when he was fatally shot. And his little girl, Bexley, who was just a few years old, sitting strapped in the car seat in the back of the car and heard that and saw that happen to her father. 4 years later now, the jury today, this afternoon, after deliberating for less than 4 hours, has reached a guilty verdict in this case. Ken, I want to ask you this, because there was someone who was driving the truck, is it possible that there could be future arrest in this case? Yeah,
there's no statute of limitations on this, number one. Number two, the investigation didn't stop just because they reached a guilty verdict. Now, it's going to continue because there are holes that needs to be filled that they haven't filled yet. As Curtis said, the defense did a good job of poking holes in some of the prosecution's arguments or whatever. But what's amazing to me, Heather and Curtis, is the fact that they were able to redraw and recreate this entire crime scene and get DNA evidence off of a tire.
Yeah.
That's kind of unheard of. They got DNA evidence off of a tire to link Tennant to the part. Now the pieces began to come together. They get Saldana, they get the ex-wife, they put them all together, put the circumstances all together. They come up with the reason why this could have been orchestrated and done. I mean, they knew the exact road that he was going to be traveling down. They knew that the proper placement of the tire was important to make him get out, to move that tire, and then execute him right there. It's just amazing how they put it all back together. But the investigation continues.
That is very, very interesting. One of the things that stood out to me as I was listening in the courtroom to the testimony is that they pointed out Mario Fernandez never told police that someone he knew had a truck like the one the Jacksonville Beach Police Department had put out to the media about a month after Bridegan was killed. It was a unique truck. It was I believe it was a Ford F-150 two-toned that had blue on it, and that's the truck that Henry Tennant had been driving. Why did he not tell police, hey, I know someone who has this truck, I know you're looking for it? You know, the first time he interviewed with police, that description had not been put out, but he talked to police after that, and that he never said that. And to me, that really stood out.
Well, he went to the police on his own to try to excuse himself and get himself out of the investigation, to take their small attention that they had at that time. They didn't have a whole lot of attention on him because he was not a suspect at that particular time. So to take that attention off of him and put it towards Tennant more so than anything. But here's the thing, when you hire somebody to do something like this, there's no honor among thieves, you know. Tennant can say, hey, I'm gonna give you the goods. I'm gonna tell you everything you need to know. You know, I did this, I was paid that, and here are the reasons why, and just call it the day. And these are the people that helped me out, be it Saldana and the ex-wife or whatever. But the fact that they put it, I just keep going back to this, they put it all together and made it into a story. Like this is the story of Jared Bridegan's life ending, and here's how it happened, here's why it happened, and here's who did it.
They really walked the jury step by step in those closing arguments. On this day this happened, and this links to this. And I think it wasn't until the closing arguments that we saw the whole picture of how all these little pieces, and the prosecutor kept saying, don't look at them isolated. When you put them all together, the big picture is that Fernandez is the thread that links it all together. I want to play for our audience a couple of statements from the prosecutor and the defense in closing arguments, talking about motive or lack thereof. Let's listen to this.
Henry Tenon didn't have motive or means or opportunity, absent one person. We started this case with the ultimate question: who did? Who had these things? And standing here a week and some days later, the answer should be clear to you and proven to you beyond a reasonable doubt. This defendant, Mario Fernandez, and his wife, Shanna Gardner.
Jared Bridegan was murdered. Henry Tenon murdered Jared Bridegan. Mario Fernandez had no motive. He had no desire.
Curtis, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, none of that's true. And back to the point you made, Heather, by the way, is what's going to happen next. And Ken's point, no honor among thieves. Well, he's been convicted now, Fernandez has. Is it time for him to rethink his strategy? He could become a state's witness. His ex-wife is the one that put him up to this. I know he went along willingly, but she's really as culpable as he is. Is it time for him to turn state's evidence and maybe try to improve his future on what his sentence might be?
Now, and they're actually still married. They are estranged, but they are still married. They were separated. So he could potentially testify against Shanna Gardner, try and cut some time on his sentence.
He could. And he could identify the driver, if whoever that was. Maybe it was her, maybe it was him, but there could be a fourth suspect out there that he could cooperate against and get further credit against his sentence.
And you're saying more arrests potentially could be made in this case?
There's no statute of limitations on it, so they can go back 10, 15, 20 years from now.
4 years in the making. Any final thoughts?
I think the prosecution did an excellent job, as well as the defense. You have to give credit where credit is due. I think both sides presented their arguments. The prosecution was a little more convincing because they had facts, they had evidence, and they had everything that they needed to convince that jury that he is the one that's guilty of all those charges that he was charged with.
All right, Ken, Curtis, thank you for your insight. So after less than 4 hours of deliberating, a 12-member jury today finding Mario Fernandez-Saldana guilty of first-degree murder and guilty of solicitation to commit a capital felony. He could face up to life in prison. There is a scheduling hearing in October to determine when he will be sentenced at a later date.